Welcome back to Strange Form. Today we are going to be journeying back into the wonderful world of the Xenomorph. With Romulus just around the corner, I thought it would be a good time to discuss the Marmit A and B alien statues. The A statue is the 2004 25th anniversary figure, and the B statue being the 2008 release of the classic bowing pose Big Chap. The big difference between the 2004 and the 2008 release of this figure being that the mold details are sharper and the paint scheme has been greatly improved, as well as the plastic dome being better fitted on the latter. Not to mention, although simply made out of cardboard, the packaging actually has an image of the egg field rather than just the all-black design of the original. Both are made of either a polystone or resin material and are actually quite heavy. In this episode, I will also be looking at my number one worst alien figure. I truly hate this one, so stay tuned to see why. And lastly, we will be talking about the Romulus creature photos that we've been seeing around the net, and whether or not I believe that it is the Big Chap or something entirely different. There might be some light spoilers, but I will also be going off of web rumors, so take it all with a grain of salt. First off, we're going to be looking at the newer version of the Type B figure. This is by far my favorite of the two, and since it is either 1/6 or very close, I think I'm going to be displaying this one next to my Hot Toys Lieutenant Ripley, as it has a vastly superior silhouette to the official Hot Toys offering. Strangely enough, this one is slightly larger in scale than the Type A figure, which I will get into later. This is, of course, nowhere near as perfect as the 1/3 scale Memogorai Amazing Work statue, which is, in my opinion, the absolute pinnacle of alien statue work, far exceeding even the Prime 1 statue, going so far as to even recreate the zipper on the suit and manufacturer marks on the tubing on the side of the head. My top 3 Big Chap statues would be number 1, the Memogorai, number 2, the Cool Props 1/3 scale Giger alien statue, which is as close as you're ever going to get to owning the one from the Giger Museum. And 3, the Prime 1 statue, either pose. The reason that the Prime 1 makes number 3 is that it's more of a stylized take on the Big Chap rather than a true one-to-one reproduction of the costume or maquette. Still, I don't think anything has been crafted that's better than these 3, and I hope to own at least one someday. But the Marmit here actually predates the Memogorai and is in its own right a fairly impressive offering, like the Memogorai, even going so far as to reproduce some costume details such as the pants and upper torso being 2 separate parts and wrinkles in the legs and arms. My only complaints about this one are that the pinky finger should not look like a normal pinky on a hand, but rather mirror the thumb. And the spurs on the heels of the feet should be sheep's jawbones. The shape is there, but the details are completely soft. Also, the tail connection looks more tacked on than a continuation of the vertebrae, which is something that I think could actually be quickly fixed with a little bit of quick-drying Sculpey. But where this one kicks the Hot Toys release up and down the court is movie-accurate proportions. Also, Sigourney Weaver being a statuesque 6 foot even, and Balaji Badeo being 6'10", with the alien headpiece adding a few more inches to that. Were you to stand this figure up, it would be in proper 1/6 scale with the Hot Toys Ripley, making this the only 1/6 scale Big Chap that looks right displayed next to the Hot Toys figure, especially if you put Jonesy's cat carrier at the Big Chap's feet. But what can you expect to pay for this statue? Playing the Japanese auction game, I got it for under $200, but these don't crop up all that often, and the going price seems to be between $250 and $500, the latter of the two being the newer repaint version. And that's the one I definitely think is worth hunting down, if for no other reason having something more film accurate to display next to your 1/6 Ripley. But be patient, these do show up regularly, especially on the Japanese auction sites, so don't pay the upper end of the market. Now let's look at the 25th anniversary Type A statue. As I noted before, originally the Type A and Type B statues were released together in 2004, and in a plain black box with the word Alien in Japanese. If you've been a collector of Japanese statues, you probably know that they don't put a lot of emphasis on box design, especially statues from the 1990s and early 2000s. A lot of the time you would just have a cheap photocopied picture of what's inside the box glued to the outside, making them look more like garage kits than high-end collectibles. The idea being that you are going to buy the product to display the contents of the box rather than the box itself. As for those contents, the 20th anniversary Type A statue is inexplicably a slightly smaller scale than the Type B, probably something closer to 1/8 scale, and with some disproportionate anatomy, such as the football player padded shoulders and the overly large mouth, making this one look a little more like the Play Arts Kai lurker from the Colonial Marines line. But there is a lot to like about this one. Though not as well done as the other, there is a good amount of attention to detail. But I don't think this one is worth the current going price. But all that being said, this is nowhere near the bottom of my most hated Alien figures, and honestly, is more accurate than the Hot Toys Big Chap release. It's a fun one, but with the prices sort of soaring, I would save my money for better releases. But the bottom of my list of the absolute worst Big Chap product ever produced goes to none other than the Palisades Alien Signature Statue. If I were to do a top 10 worst Alien Big Chaps ever, number 10 would be the Hot Toys release, as I know they could have done better. But 9 through 1 would all be this one. Words can't describe how much I hate this statue. So much so that I even thought about clickbaiting this episode, with me going at it with either a baseball bat or a chainsaw. Yeah, a chainsaw. That would be nice. The only reason I have it is that several years ago I was able to pick it up for about $40 and decided to grab it to see if it was as bad as all the product stills I'd seen. Plus, I felt that I could use the base if I decided to build the Marmit vinyl figure. But in hand, it was so much worse than I expected. From the stupid pose to the completely inaccurate anatomy, all the way down to the ridiculous paint scheme, this thing is overpriced and embarrassingly ugly. I am one of those fair shake kind of reviewers. I try to find a little good and a little bad in each product, letting you know the high points and the reasons to buy it, but the low points and the things they could have done better. It's rare that I will just gush about something without pointing out a few of the things that I think could be done better next time. But it's also rare that I will just lay into something. This one, however, deserves every bit of vitriol, as it is such an incredibly lazy cash grab. For no reason at all, mine has a completely white knee, rusty red paint slopped all over the body, and the mold is so poorly crafted that there's tubing that just fades in and then disappears at certain places. For some reason, they also gave him giant, puffy cartoon feet, and the face is the monster from the film Split Second, a great film that's a cross between Alien, Predator, and a little bit of I Come in Peace thrown in for good measure, but with a creature that's supposed to be an obvious send-up to the Xenomorph, i.e. a caricature. I actually saw that one in the theater, and it's a subject I would actually rather talk about than this abomination. My biggest issue is that both Palisades and Sideshow decided it was a good idea to capitalize on this stupid thing and price it at a premium for lazy work, just because it was big and there weren't very many other Big Chap statues on the market at the time. Heck, it's hard to see here, but if you look through the dome, it actually has giant cartoon eyes in the skull. I don't mind hyper-stylized takes on the creature. As a matter of fact, I quite enjoy them, but that's not what this is. This isn't an artist rendition. It's simply a lazy bad sculpt pushed out as a premium collectible. So my verdict on this one is don't buy it. Don't even accept it as a gift, because the person giving it to you are surely offering it to you because they dislike you. On top of all of that, it's in one of those poses that is an improper center of gravity pose, where if there weren't pegs holding it into place, it would just simply topple forward. This can affect even some of the greatest sculpts out there, such as a few of the Court of the Dead figures. Unless it's implied movement, this always bothers me, as the figure looks like it's going to topple off the shelf. With all of that unpleasantness out of the way, let's discuss what we know so far about the Romulus creature. Stop here if you don't want to hear any of the rumors, but nothing I'm about to say should give away too much of the plot, and most of this is just rumor mill theorizing. One of the questions I'm seeing bandied around the internet is the creature shown in the trailer, and a couple of the released stills, the original Big Chap from 1979? Well, first let's clarify what a Big Chap is. The term was coined by Ridley Scott, who used it to lovingly refer to Balaji Badeo, often yelling, "Bring in the Big Chap," intimating Mr. Badeo's extreme height when preparing to shoot scenes with the creature. Over time, the fan base picked up on this and started to refer to the creature from the first film by this moniker, largely to differentiate it from other iterations. So when somebody says Big Chap, they are referring to the creature designed from the first film exclusively. Like with any fan base, many hardcore Alien fans are extremely sensitive to the anatomical differences between film and comic book versions of the creature, often leading to a multitude of discussions regarding canon possibilities for changes in the creature's design between films. My favorite being that all xenomorphs have the dome when born, but lose them in successive moltings, the ones we see in James Cameron's Aliens being the oldest that we've seen in the entire franchise. Some credibility is lent this theory by the fact that you can actually see indentations where the skull would have been if you look closely at the front of the dome in the Alien Warrior in Cameron's film. These indentations are something that wasn't picked up on by many artists or sculptors until high-definition photographs of the original suits were made available, and it looks almost as if the skull fills in and the rest of the carapace falls off, revealing the ridged head underneath. Though they simply drew it on, in the first film, the overall design of the head underneath the dome is the same as the domeless heads of the creature in the second film. But other than that, there are too many anatomical differences between the creatures from Cameron's film and the big chap we see in Ridley Scott's. So they simply cannot be the same class. Cameron's aliens have a blade on the forearm, 5 fingers instead of 6, a sharper knife-like tail instead of the scorpion barb that the Big Chap has, and more animalistic-looking feet. My theory has always been that the Big Chaps are bulkier, larger tanks that are good for hive building, and the creatures that we see in the second film are mostly warriors and drones. And of course the creature we see in the third film being a Praetorian-like creature to protect the gestating queen. And the creatures from the first, second, and third films are the only time that we see the unabridged life cycle of the Xenomorphs that were spawned by the derelict, so I look to those three to be the true form of the creature. Resurrection, Prometheus, and Covenant are all genetic experiments. So what are we looking at when we see these images from Romulus? It's possible that it's just a battle-damaged creature that is completely separate from the original film. But there has also been a persistent rumor going around that the Big Chap from the 1979 film does in fact make an appearance in this one, i.e. the company retrieved it after the destruction of the Nostromo, and that's what we're seeing here in this shot, the retrieved creature being brought aboard the Renaissance station. From what I've cobbled together, the main plot of the new film is about a group of young runaways who are trying to escape the crushing poverty of an atmospheric processing colony, only to find themselves on a derelict research station abandoned by the company, a research station which consists of 2 modules named Romulus and Remus, one being the pinnacle of futuristic tech, and the other more antiquated, with a good amount of analog technology. Somehow the company had retrieved the Big Chap and was trying to engineer more of the species before losing control. Based on this leak, I've heard complaints from a few fans saying, how would they retrieve the Big Chap in the vastness of space? But I'm of the mind that it's perfectly plausible, in that the Nostromo probably left a pretty big debris field, as well as a radiological signature. Not to mention, the company probably had telemetry and trajectory data sent by Ash before they lost contact with the ship. Though the alien was ejected from Ripley's space pod, the Narcissus hadn't really gone that far from the explosion when Ripley was attacked. So it's perfectly plausible that the company could have retrieved the creature's remains. Heck, we can currently track items that are smaller at distances greater than the Nostromo's debris field would have been. Also, Fede Alvarez seems like a superfan, and to be a very detail-oriented director. During his Romulus interview, he went so far as to say that he contacted James Cameron to ask what the notorious bug hunt line meant, and if the Space Marines had ever encountered the Xenomorph before. To which Cameron probably patted him on the head and said, "I don't know, kid, it just sounded like something cool to say," and then got back in line for his producer credit, similar to his involvement with the last Terminator film. But my take on that line was always that the Marines had run into some alien life forms before, but nothing as vicious as the creatures they were about to meet on LV-426. And the word xenomorph had been used before to describe other life forms they had encountered. The word xenomorph is simply 2 Greco-Latin words meaning foreign shape or strange form. Honestly, I think it would be really interesting to explore what other life forms the Space Marines had encountered, and this may be something that we will see explored more in the Alien TV series. Or at least touched on, as the rumors regarding that one are that it's about a competing company's research ship crashing into a Weyland-Yutani-owned building, so who knows what kind of research experiments they were doing, and what kind of species we'll see. But like with the term Big Chap, since that fateful scene in Aliens, the word xenomorph has become inextricably tied to the Star Beast, whether or not that is actually the alien's true name. The creature we see here in the Romulus trailer and stills does appear to be battle damaged. There's an obvious crack in the dome towards the front of the face, and there's what appears to be some damage or loss of the dome towards the back of the head. It's hard to see, but it does look like the type of head we see underneath the translucent dome from the first film. The musculature on the side of the face and the teeth and the chin are slightly different than the Big Chap. This one also appearing to have some sort of striped coloration on the cheek muscles and no tendons pulling back the cheek all the way to the edge of the jawline. It also doesn't appear to have the slight underbite of the canines, which is one of those things that differentiates a really accurate Big Chap to its counterparts. The lower canines should clasp over the top, and there should be a slight indentation on the top canines. This has always struck me as a really interesting design choice. However, despite those differences, there still is a way that this could be the Big Chap. In the novelization of the original Alien, it describes the reason that we see the alien blast out of the Narcissus's thrust port 3 times is that it had 3 layers of skin that came off during that sequence. So originally it wasn't supposed to be just a cool visual effect, but actually something happening to the body of the creature. Some have postulated that the company retrieved the alien's remains from the Narcissus still being strung along like a yo-yo, but I think this is unlikely in that at the beginning of Aliens, we actually see that the spear gun is still clamped down by the hatch that Ripley closed on it after ejecting the creature. It doesn't seem likely that the company wouldn't have entered the Narcissus even if they intended to just leave Ripley there to float on. So it's more likely that the Big Chap was ejected completely and massively damaged, but either not killed or in the end regenerated somehow. And what we are seeing here is a slight amount of regeneration, causing the creature to look different than its previous self. The other answer is the one that would disappoint me to no end, and that is that they redesigned the Big Chap and just expect us not to notice. But we might not be seeing the Big Chap at all. We could be seeing some sort of bridge between the creatures of the first and second film, i.e. a creature molting into what we see in the second movie. Being how this takes place on the defunct Renaissance base with the Romulus and Remus modules, we don't yet know how long the facility has been abandoned. Alvarez stating that they took design cues from both the original film and Isolation could mean that we are going to see something a little faster and more agile than the Big Chap. And the only Big Chap that we'll see in this film is the one that's burnt to a crisp. The rumors also seem to be indicating that we will see at least 3 creatures, the Big Chap and another more standard Xenomorph, and something new, something we haven't seen before, which I really hope isn't a science experiment gone wrong trope. The alien itself is scary enough to carry a film, so if there is something new, I hope it's something clever that they've thrown into the alien's life cycle. Now, if you follow me, you've probably heard me say this before, but I don't think they will be completely retconning Ridley Scott's last 2 entries. More of a course correction if anything, especially when I heard that they are going to have the Romulus and Remus labs. This would be a good way of showing how more wealthy and well-funded endeavors have future tech in line with Prometheus, and yet most everyone else is probably getting by with more tried-and-true analog technology. i.e. retrofuturism can go hand in hand with a more advanced looking technology, especially if humanity had encountered several economic downturns. Also, more convenient doesn't always mean more reliable, i.e. truckers using CB instead of cellular. The one thing I do know for a fact is that they will be altering the idea that David had anything to do with the creation of the creature, which didn't even make sense in Ridley Scott's own continuity, as you see one in the mural near the beginning of Prometheus. So we are probably going to learn that the black goo was based on the alien rather than the other way around, which is a perfectly fine answer for me. I like the idea that the android couldn't get the perfect organism right, and can't adequately recreate what nature has already perfected. Another aspect I would like to see corrected from Scott's newer entries is that the mummified space jockey on LV-426 is an overlord creature to the engineers. The thing that we see in Alien was definitely not wearing a mask, and was much bigger than the engineers we saw in Prometheus and Covenant. The only way I can see out of this continuity issue is to explain the engineers are a drone class rather than the true form of the space jockey. Other than that, nothing really needs to be course corrected. Prometheus and Covenant can stand as side stories about the dangers of trying to weaponize the alien. In the end, I hope that naming the facility the Renaissance Station is portents of things to come, as this very well could be the rebirth of the franchise. There was nothing more disappointing as an Alien fan than hearing Ridley Scott say, "The beast is done. It's cooked." In an interview leading up to the reboot of the franchise, Scott has kept a stranglehold on the series moving forward and going back to its roots, and going back to what the fans want for the better part of the last decade. And this new installment really does look like a return to form. So let's hope we are all experiencing the Alien Renaissance, as the franchise is given new life this summer. Strange Form, signing off. And remember, never stop collecting.